Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Cyrus Webb Presents. I'm your host, Cyrus Webb. So glad you guys could join us once again. For those tuning in on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and on X, we're glad that you all could join us. Going to bring in our friends over on Instagram so they can enjoy the conversation as well. And then we're going to connect with our friends over on Amazon. And I will introduce you guys to today's guest. We have a great one for you today, celebrating her pub day. And for those who are tuning in on Amazon Live, welcome. You all are watching Cyrus Webb Presents. If you guys are new to us
Uh-oh.
on Amazon, make sure you guys do hit that follow button. You see it here in this corner or down below. You also will see the book by our next guest. We're excited to welcome Natasha Williams to our broadcast today. Natasha is celebrating the release of her brand new book, The Parts of Him I Kept. You see, I have my Kindle edition right here. You guys can get the paperback, the hardcover, and the Kindle edition here on Amazon. We're going to talk to Natasha not only about this book, but also what it's been like for her to share her own story with the world. Natasha, thank you so much for the time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Cyrus. It really means a lot to me to talk to you today.
The pleasure is definitely all mine. I noticed when I was prepping for this segment, Natasha, you said on X recently that this is a journey that's been 10 years in the making. How does it feel now on Pub Day to be able to share the parts of him I kept with the world?
Um, so we had a launch event amidst Martha Ellen Marks' photographs of women in Ward 81, which is a lockdown women's psych ward, and it was so evocative and so powerful a space to be reading in, and I felt my father so close to me on Sunday, and I just feel as if he shouldered so much in his life, and I feel so honored to be sharing his story. And every time I share it, every time I enter a public space with the story, someone comes up to me afterwards and tells me their story. And so I know that there are a lot of people living with mental illness, caring for people who live with mental illness. And so I'm so proud, so pleased to be sharing the story. Yeah, and thank you for the opportunity to talk to your listeners.
Well, look, it's our pleasure. Javon White, hello to you. I see you over there on IG. Glad you could join us. Javon says, congratulations to you, Natasha. And that leads us to this. You and I had not connected, in talk before today's conversation. But
Yeah.
now having been able to read the parts of him I kept, now you're finding other people. How does it feel, Natasha, to have people who have no direct connection to you feel connected to you through your story?
It's exactly what you want art to do, right?
Mhm.
You want to touch other people with the things that touch you and that are meaningful to you, and to make people feel less alone, and to broaden community. And I do feel like I've entered into much larger conversation about mental health care and the power of destigmatizing that experience by talking about it, because the studies show early care, early prognosis is so important for people
Right.
in reintegrating into community. And when my father was young, we just didn't talk about it. We
Yeah.
coped with it. We tried to keep him safe, but we didn't talk about it.
And so let's talk about talking about it now. Well, now, of course, the book is out, but you had made the decision in writing this book that you wanted to talk to us about what helped you to not only take the steps necessary, Natasha, to share your story, but to be so transparent in it. What was that motivator for you?
Um, I didn't intend to write this book.
Okay.
I started writing when my aging schizophrenic dad needed assisted living, and I was faced with the limited number of options for him, and it really resonated for me. That he had spent so much of his life in institutions, in the care of strangers, and now it was my responsibility, to find that place. And I wrote that as really a missive to my family, to let them know what was happening. And it really touched. I shared it with some friends too, and it really touched people. Um, and then I submitted it to a writer, writer critique, and he encouraged me to write the whole book. So as far as courage goes, I feel like I kind of stumbled in it. Like you were saying, you became a spokesperson and a radio host because someone said to you, "Hey, you have a lovely voice and a message." Similar. He liked my writing and he felt the story was worth telling, um, and it took me a long time to really figure out what the story was. In my mind, it was always an ode to my father, who
Right.
shouldered schizophrenia with really a tremendous amount of dignity and a sense of humor, and whose love really, you know, affected me as a child. Um, and readers know when you're not telling the truth,
Yeah.
and they want you to tell the truth because that is how you feel closer to a person through, through a story. So it
Right.
was really important to me to find the truth, not just to share it, but also to learn about, learn for myself. Because yeah, when you're coping with mental illness or a family member with physical illness, you do a lot of putting your own needs aside and a lot of coping and a lot of dealing with day to day. So
Right.
took some took some effort to unearth it all.
Right. And yet you've been able to do it and now share it in such a great way. I want to say hello to my mom who's watching on Facebook.
Oh,
Hey, Mom,
Zadie.
good to be able to see you
Hi,
over there on
Zadie.
Facebook. But what I thought was so fascinating, and maybe you choose to use a different word, Natasha. I'm just talking about myself as a reader.
Mm,
One thing that came up, and I was saying it to you before we went live here, is that there were other instances of trauma or episodes of even what could be seen by many readers as episodes of PTSD that kind of come throughout your journey that you share in the book.
mm,
Even going back to your grandparents,
mm.
did when you started writing it, did you automatically think about that, like situations with your grandfather in connection also with your own father, or was that something that kind of came up as you started the writing process?
Yes, it definitely came up as I started the writing process, and what I was so interested in was, I spent the summer after James Lasdon said you should write this book. I just wrote. I sat at my kitchen counter and I wrote, um, without any censoring, without any thinking about it. And some writers talk about it like you're vomiting on the page, and it just feels like you're just getting it out. And then it was the process of figuring out why those memories stuck and why those were the memories that my subconscious was delivering to me to tell the story,
Right.
and then figuring out how to structure the story in a way that sort of leads you through. I start the story at a moment, a very tragic moment when my daughter, my father's daughter, drowns, and that's usually how we meet people who are struggling with mental illness in the headlines in a tragic moment. And I wanted to tell the story behind the headlines. And the story behind the headlines is the necessity of an extended family that stands by people. And my grandmother's dedication to my father, her lifelong commitment to keep him sheltered and keep him safe, made all the difference. And she definitely schooled me in his care. It was clear that, we were united in taking care of my father as a family. And,
Right.
his siblings, were part of that at different junctures of his life, too. And when I finished writing the story, and was trying to make sense of it all, I felt a little disembodied with it, Cyrus. Like, um, I don't feel like I had a traumatic childhood. I feel like I had a loving childhood that had a lot of experiences in it, a lot of confusing experiences in it, but it was all material for making sense of my own life, and I'm grateful for it. I wouldn't have asked for a different father.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In talking about the title, the parts of him I kept, Natasha, you referenced something earlier when I asked about the book connecting you even with strangers and being able to form those bonds. And you talked about art. Art is definitely part of what you've had with your father. I
Mhm.
remember in the book, he talked to you about what he wanted to do when it come to painting, when he found himself in the space, and what he wanted to do when it came to art and expressing himself. Were those part of the moments that kind of brought back those brighter memories for you of not only his realizing where he was in the facility he was, but also not losing touch of that gift and that ability to use it?
Yeah. I think my father was always trying to figure out his place in the world, and what he could do, uh, you know, to save it. And the manic expression of that was, he was a paranoid schizophrenic with a messiah complex, and when he was losing touch with reality, he thought he was the messiah. Um, and that he could save the world. But underneath that, he was just a man who cared so deeply, and wanted to take care of people who were less fortunate in the world. And I think it was partly because he was one of those people that he really had a lot of empathy for things like racial injustice and poverty and hunger, and he wasn't a political person, but he was a musician, and he was a painter, and he saw those as modalities for getting in touch with something bigger than our lives. When we sat around listening to John Coltrane, um, and ruminating wordlessly on what his purpose was. And as his daughter, I think I felt that really deeply.
Right.
um, I'm not sure if I answered your question.
You did. You
Okay.
did, and but it does bring up another question that I want to ask you about what you're worthy of yourself, Natasha. That comes up in the book. I want to welcome those tuning in. See you guys over there on YouTube. Hello to you, those of you on Amazon. Appreciate you guys joining us, as well as on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, X, and on Instagram. You all are watching Cyrus Webb Presents. We're excited about talking with Natasha Williams today. She's celebrating the book. You guys can see here on my Kindle, The Parts of Him I Kept. It's available now on hardcover, paperback, and Kindle. You can see them here on Amazon, either here on the side or down below. So feel free to be able to click on the one that you would like to be able to get now, and to be able, of course, to add it to your cart. The Kindle edition, of course, is a one click. You guys can be able to get it right now. I think it's only $6.99. Yeah, $6.99 right now for the Kindle edition of the book. I want to talk to you about. There was another theme that came up in your book, Natasha. One is what you were worthy of when you made the decision about, for your own good and
Mhm.
well-being, you having to physically leave the house. Your thoughts
Mhm.
about that, but also knowing what you were worthy of. And I felt that really when you were talking about Ken in the book as well. What was
Mm.
it like for you to think about your own worth and value and what you deserved in the world?
Mm. A friend of mine who, Daisy Foot, who was at my launch, asked me, "What made you rescue yourself?" Which I thought was such an interesting phrase, and
Yeah,
she was saying, like, so many people who came from what you came from might have descended into the chaos, and
right.
you were able to come out of it.
Yeah,
Um, and I would say the first answer to that question is my father's love. He showed me such a sense of esteem and care. There was never a question to me that I wasn't a priority in his life, and I think you can't underestimate the power of a parent's love in a
yeah,
child's life, no matter what is going on. That the walls could be burning down, and if you feel like your parent has your back and loves you, it's very powerful.
yeah,
And then you talked about my grandparents. Grandparents, save lives. My grandparents definitely advocated for me, and it was complicated because they also involved me in my father's mother involved me in his care in ways that were hard for me as a child sometimes. But they definitely um, communicated that I was important and cared for me. And I honestly, I found a really good therapist when I was a teenager that was recommended to me by a teacher. Um, so I think all those things helped me feel like I was worth prioritizing my own needs,
Right.
and also that taught me, how to do it. Like in the book, I talk about a moment when my dad was in the psych ward and called me to get his instruments and his paintings from the house,
Mm.
and I just sobbed in my therapy office because it was such it was such a very reasonable request, but at the time his life was in such a nadir. It was in such a dark place that I was
Right.
going to encounter the crack pipes and I just couldn't go.
Yeah.
And I lovingly told him that I couldn't go, and I had to trust that, he would survive that. And he had other people, friends who might do it. And if they didn't, still we would survive. And I think at the core of that was also that I knew that he would still love me if I put myself first. And you
Yeah.
have to have that family member who can understand you're saying no because you're taking care of yourself. And I had to do that before I could take care of him on an ongoing basis, as an adult.
Right. Such a great point, and I'm glad you shared that, Natasha. I want to say hello to Driver the Barber. Hello to you. I think it's pronounced Indatori. Hello to you over there on IG as well. Lee, I think it's pronounced Kalish. Lee Kalish on Amazon said it's a great book. I totally agree with you, Lee. Over there on Amazon as well. And again, for those who haven't gotten it for themselves, for those tuning in on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube, you'll find a link for Amazon that'll bring you guys over to Amazon. For those, of course, you guys on Amazon, you guys can see the book right there. I want to talk to you about this new chapter of your life, then, Natasha, pun intended there, of being a published author. I know we're just technically now at the release date, but has that sunk in for you that you're now beginning a new era of your own life now as an author?
I think my father would have been so proud that probably the most meaningful thing I will do in my life, aside from being a mother and a partner to my husband and a family member, is to write our story. And I say that because there's a lot of things I considered doing in my life, and for one reason or another, with a challenging childhood and then wanting to be home with my children, really wanting to be home with my kids instead of pursuing research that I was doing at Hunter College when I was a young person. And so, writing this book has been something I've been able to complete and I'm proud of. And I do feel like I'm part of a bigger conversation about mental health care in the US. And in a moment like this, when like 1 in 6 um, people in America are struggling with mental illness of some sort, 20% of Americans have some kind of experience with mental illness, and young people, especially. I um, I feel honored to be part of the conversation, and in my father's name, and to be part of a community of caregivers who I think we often undervalue and underestimate. And I think I believe caregivers are the bedrock of a community,
Right.
and I'm proud to call myself a caregiver, and I like to carry that conversation forward.
Yeah, love that. Jody on Amazon says, so important to think about as a parent and child. The best of us let each other put ourselves first. I totally agree with that,
Yeah.
Jody. Sure. So for people who may not know you, for people who are just learning about you and your own journey, as well as this conversation that we're having today, right now, Natasha, about mental health, what do you hope the parts of him I kept, what do you hope kind of lingers with them when they finish the book?
Um, I guess 3 things I would say. One is, that we are not alone in our efforts to keep our vulnerable family members and community members safe,
Mhm.
and we need to tell our stories, we need to share our stories so that we can find that support and that camaraderie. Um, I do believe that mental illness is as much a biological condition as it is a social problem, and when we abandon the community care programs that we have, and we abandon family supports, and we leave people who are mentally ill on the street, it affects us all. Our streets are filled with people who are living on the streets and or then ushered into prison at great cost, not only psychically and emotionally, but financially.
Yeah.
Um, so um, I want to advocate, for those ideas and yeah, keep the conversation going.
Yeah. Well, I think this book is going to do a lot to do that. Again, everyone, Natasha Williams has been our guest. The Parts of Him I Kept is the book. You all can get it, of course, in print, or you can be able to get the Kindle edition as well. And definitely invite you guys to be able to do that. Natasha also has a website. Natasha, let our audience know, how can they stay connected with you?
My website is natashawilliamswriter.com, and there are links on the website for online. You can buy the book through bookshop.org, which supports local bookstores, and of course Amazon, which is a purveyor of books extraordinaire, and Barnes and Noble. Yeah, and I have events on the website if you're in the Hudson Valley area or beyond. I'll be up in Albany in September at the New York Writers Institute Book Festival, and I'd love to meet you all.
All right. So make sure you guys are staying connected with Natasha. Amazon customer says, great interview. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Glad you could join us. Natasha, so glad. I told you the time was going to fly by. Thank you so much for dropping by. Really appreciate the time.
Thank you so much, Cyrus. Really,
More than
my
welcome.
pleasure. Yeah.
And we thank your audience for tuning in to another great segment of Cyrus Webb Presents. Until next time, you all make it a great one. We'll talk to you soon. Take care.